Hey everyone, welcome to another one of my reviews. Today I'm reviewing the movie X-Men: Days of Future Past. Now, before I begin, I will warn you that this video does contain spoilers concerning key events that happen in this movie. So, if you don't want it ruined for you, or you don't want any spoilers, well, just hit that little X up there in the corner right there. See it? Right there, and end this video altogether, because from this point on we will be discussing a lot of what happened in the movie. Now, with that being said, if you're still watching, you've either 1. Seen the movie already, or 2. You don't care about spoilers. Either way, let us begin, shall we? First off, I would like to say I rather enjoyed this film. I feel like it was a breath of fresh air for the X-Men franchise, with movies like X-Men 3: The Last Stand and X-Men Origins Wolverine leaving such a bad taste in people's mouth. People lost faith in where this X-Men franchise could go, but now with X-Men First Class and now this movie, it seemed to breathe new life into the series. Now the question is it enough to revive the franchise as a whole? Well, only time will tell that, but I feel like it is heading in the right direction, especially with the next movie that's coming up after this, called X-Men Apocalypse. Maybe with these 3 movies, the X-Men franchise can finally compete with the 3 juggernauts in the superhero movie franchise business. Well, we got Marvel Studios with the Avengers, we got Sony with the Spider-Man universe, and of course we got the upcoming Warner Brothers DC universe. Maybe these 3 movies can finally bring the X-Men franchise to compete with these 3 titans. And I think it would be absolutely epic if it can, and it will be a total win for all moviegoers. Now, once again, I will repeat that this is yet to be seen. We will just have to keep on watching and see if they can live up to that. But, like I said, it is heading in the right direction. But back to the subject at hand, the plot of this movie revolves around the fact that in the future, mutant kind has almost been wiped out off the face of the planet by a killing machine called a Sentinel. And these Sentinels now have even targeted humans who also possess the mutant gene within them to produce children that are mutants. So now the remaining X-Men, led by Xavier, have made a plan for a last-ditch effort to stop this from ever happening. And the way they do, their plan is to work is by sending one of their own back into the past to stop a key event from happening that triggers every event from that point on to this future post-apocalyptic world. And it's when Mystique assassinates the original designer of the Sentinels, Bolivar Trask. And as a result of that, she herself gets captured, and they study her DNA and find the secrets of her morphing ability and actually implement that into the Sentinel program, leading to these future Sentinels that can adapt to any mutant power possible. And the one they end up sending back, of course, is Wolverine. And his job is to get both Xavier and Magneto to work together to help him stop Mystique from killing Bolivar Trask. That's quite a task. I mean, Wolverine, not exactly a leader type. Xavier, if you see in this movie, is not exactly in a good point. Magneto, you don't know, you don't see how this could work when you first watch the movie. But now the plot itself is not exactly original, but it is a superhero movie, so it's supposed to stick a little close to its source material. And this story actually comes from a story in the X-Men comics by the same name, Days of Future Past. Now, there are differences between the comic story and the movie, but there's obvious reasons for that, and mainly it's cast reasons. There are obviously story differences, but you expect that from a movie to take a different direction. In the original comic book story, it was Kitty Pryde who was transported back into the past, but you can see why they didn't choose her. For one, she wasn't alive in the 70s. Not in this universe anyway. She was not alive, so there was no way that anyone could transport her mind into her past body, because she didn't exist. And instead, they chose Wolverine, and there were several reasons they chose Wolverine. And the top foremost of that is that he's the staple of this franchise. When everyone thinks of X-Men, they think of Wolverine. So what better character to breathe new life in the series than him? Now, they didn't leave Kitty Pryde out entirely. instead, they put her into another position in the story that was originally held by Rachel Summers. See, Rachel Summers in the original story is the one who sent Kitty Pryde back into the past by sending her consciousness into her younger body. Well, this time Kitty Pryde is the one doing the transferring of minds to a past body. Now, that might be a little bit of a stretch concerning what her mutant abilities is. Her original mutant ability is to be able to phase through objects. But I guess in this future, her ability has developed so great that now she can actually phase minds through time. It's a bit of a stretch. I would love to see Xavier actually get a part and help her guide her through this process a little more, but nitpicking. But the other major difference, of course, is Mystique was, well, the assassination that Mystique was going to carry out was going to be against Senator Robert Kelly. Well, instead, it's, of course, Bolivar Trask, the original designer of the Sentinels, and the reason being is that in the X-Men movie universe, Senator Robert Kelly has already been introduced in the first movie, and he looks a little too young to be a senator back in the 70s, and I don't think it would have made sense. It would have been great if they could have found some way to do that, but I'm okay with the fact that they used Bolivar Trask in place. It rather played out well for the movie itself. But even with these differences, it definitely did not ruin the movie. And in some ways, it actually enhanced the movie, and it really connected all the X-Men movies that have been before. Now, okay, first off, what did I like about this movie? This is the fun part I've been waiting for. Well, for starters, I have to start with the Sentinels. Ever since they were teased in X-Men 3 The Last Stand, people have wanted the Sentinels in an X-Men movie, and we finally get them. We finally get them in all their badass qualities. And they rather stuck pretty close to the original concept of their designs. I mean, obviously they tweaked them for more realistic reasoning. They made them look a little more realistic, but it definitely did not take away from what the Sentinels were. Gigantic killing robots that hunted mutants. And I love their design, I really did. I absolutely love their design, especially in the 70s. The 70s was quite original in their concept, because they wanted to make them obviously look a little more realistic and take technology from the 70s. Instead of getting like jet propulsions in their legs and laser beams that they fire out of their hands that you see in the comics and the cartoons, they went with a more realistic technology, and they built the flying ability out of Harrier jet technology, which I thought was excellently incorporated into their bodies. And also the fact is, instead of using lasers, they use chain guns on the arms, which was beautifully done. I mean, even though a lot of mutants could easily avoid that and it wouldn't be a major problem for them, but there would be a lot of mutants that do, this would pose a problem for. But then, of course, you get the future Sentinels, who have the abilities, thanks to Mystique, to be able to adapt to any mutant powers, and you see them able to instantly use these abilities against mutants. Like when they were able to take Iceman's ability to manipulate cold and Sunspot's ability to generate fire, and they got a chance to use them against each other, and these were badass Sentinels. This reminded me like the Terminator 2, I think it's T-1000, with his ability to morph and form weapons. He became liquid metal. They reminded me a lot about that. And these definitely were very threatening Sentinels. And they were really, in a sense, I guess, based off the future Sentinel that you see in most comics, which is Nimrod. He's supposed to be the ultimate Sentinel. He can't be destroyed because he would reformat. He has shields. It's just all this stuff. And so I think in a way they tried to base it off that, but it doesn't quite look the same as Nimrod. But you know what? I don't care, because those were some awesome Sentinels. Scary, too. Now, the other thing I liked about the movie, and this was a key point for me, because one of my major problems with the original trilogy was the fact is, it seemed like it was more about Wolverine in the first three movies than anyone else. And don't get me wrong, I love Wolverine. He's my favorite character of the X-Men. He's one of my favorite characters of all time. But I didn't like the fact that they used him too much, way overdid it in the first three movies. It became more like Wolverine and the X-Men than the X-Men. And this movie, I mean, yes, Wolverine is one of the major stars, but he almost took a back seat in a lot of the movie because it became about Xavier and Magneto, which I loved. They used him very well. It was beautifully done, and I'm glad to see that. And I hope they continue this with future movies because the X-Men is about a team. They're not about one mutant. So that was definitely a great thing. Another thing I really liked about this movie was the actual relationship between Xavier and Magneto. We really got to see an evolution of that. I mean, we've gotten little teasers about why it is what it is from the first three movies. But this movie really showed you how they became bitter enemies. And, you know, we already saw in the first movie, X-Men First Class, how they started off as friends, but then you now get to see how that evolved into their rivalry, which plays out, of course, in the first X-Men trilogy. And it was really, like I said, it was beautifully done with James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender. And also, you got to see that in Ian McKellen's and Patrick Stewart's versions of these characters. In a way, you got to see how James McAvoy's professor becomes Professor X in the future. You can actually see some of Patrick Stewart in him. And the same thing is with Michael Fassbender. You saw him evolve from the X-Men First Class, where he was sort of being a team player to being the leader of mutant kind and against humans with Ian McKellen's version of Magneto. So you really got to see that turn, the evolution of each character. And I'm very big about character development in stories. It's what really pushes the story onward and makes it even more interesting. And they did a great job. I'm glad to see they actually did some great character development in the story. The next thing I loved, though, was the bold step they took. Because this being a time travel movie, it's always risky territory because you step on sacred territory whenever you do it. I had a problem with that in Star Trek, the new Star Trek series franchise, because it was pretty much going back in time and rewriting everything that happened so we could start new movies, and I was a little about that. This one I wasn't so much, and I guess probably part of the reason was because the director who came back, Bryan Singer, was the one who created the original X-Men trilogy, so he was the one that erased all of his previous movies, not anyone else, him. And as a result, he done so nicely. I mean, there were still parts of the first trilogy that probably will remain from here on out, but key events that he made mistakes on, like, I'll get into that in a second, about certain people coming back. I don't want to ruin that just yet, but the fact is, it's very risky territory, and it was a very bold move, and I think it played out rather well. And this will actually be able to set things right in the X-Men universe, and maybe we can actually get a very good quality story. And I don't know. I just hope we don't start killing off major characters again, because that was my one of my other problems with the X-Men trilogy, was they killed off way too many major characters. Some people didn't get enough character development. I could go on forever about that, but I'm not going to. Another thing, of course, I liked, was the story itself. This story was not rushed. Like a lot of movies that I've seen in recent years, story always feels rushed. They throw the characters in, don't give you much of a backstory, and throw you right into the action. And you're supposed to have some feelings for these characters. And that's kind of tough when you just rush through it like that. This movie felt like it took its time to tell the story. It had a great character development. It had enough action to keep you on your seat. And the story was very, very bold in what it did. So overall, I felt like it was one of the best stories I've seen in a movie, at least for a superhero movie, in a very long time. And that's why I said it's going in the right direction, because it's like it carried on from the First Class. Everything they had in the First Class kind of blended into this movie, and at the same time, it still tied pieces to all the movies that have happened in the past, from Wolverine, X-Men 1, X-Men 2, X-Men 3. It tied you got little Easter eggs of everything in it, and it was great, and it didn't feel overdone, and it didn't feel forced. It was really refreshing, very refreshing. And another thing I really loved was the fact that it used almost the entire cast of X-Men. Of pretty much every X-Men movie. Almost. Now, obvious exceptions, either because the characters had passed away in the original trilogy, or they weren't really that important. But most of the major characters that appeared in all the previous X-Men movies were here. Bad guys and good guys. And it was not so overwhelming that you were like crowded in with a whole bunch of new characters and a whole bunch of old characters, and it felt like it was overstuffed like a lot of movies do. Memory serves me correctly, I think of Spider-Man 3 with the New Goblin, Venom, and Sandman, and then of course you got Batman Returns with the Penguin and Catwoman that end up evolving into the Batman. What was it? The one with the Riddler and the Two-Face and whatnot, and Robin, and before long, it seems like there's way too many characters trying to be flung in just to make it bigger and badder. And they were able to put all these characters in and give them the role they deserve, and that's it. So I definitely love that. And of course, one of the final things I loved was the ending itself. This was an ending that kept you on the edge of your seat during the whole time, even though you knew how it was going to turn out to a certain extent. But it really kept you on the edge of your seat, and you wondered if Mystique was going to end up going through with the assassination and pretty much determining the fate of the future X-Men, that they were going to get killed by the future Sentinels. So all this time you're like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Are they going to stop her? Why isn't Magneto helping? Why is he still trying to unite mutant kind against humans? Doesn't he realize what the future holds? And then, of course, the big finale, where everything is resolved, and Mystique doesn't kill Bolivar Trask, instead walks away, and as a result of that, Wolverine, of course, returns to the future. And this is where things get really interesting, because he wakes up in Xavier's school, and he's a teacher now, and all the original X-Men from X1 are still alive. We saw Rogue, we saw Iceman, I think we saw Colossus, Kitty Pryde, Jean Grey, and then, of course, the big shocker was Cyclops. And we're talking about original actors who played these. They came back for this one cameo at the end. And, Kelsey Grammer as Beast. It felt so great. And the only question is, what happened before that? But I'll get into that later. But that was truly an epic ending. Now, with all the stuff that I did enjoy about the movie, obviously there were things that I did not like. I don't think I've ever found a movie that I've loved the entire thing, but the things I didn't like, okay, let's get into that. Well, obviously my number one was the relationship between Quicksilver and Magneto. And obviously people that are not comic book fans, some of y'all may not be, but those of us who are know that Quicksilver is the son of Magneto. And we never really, we got a teaser for that in this movie, but we really not gotten a good, solid explanation. There was no, we could have used Quicksilver more in this movie with Magneto's and developed that relationship between father and son, even though Quicksilver would end up turning against him, because that's the way the story plays out. But we did get a teaser of it. He did sort of mention Quicksilver sort of did mention that his mother did have a thing for a guy that can manipulate metal, and like, duh, it's your father right beside you, dummy. But, you know, it's a small gripe, and maybe that will change as we go further along in this next movie. We'll see. Next thing that I didn't like was that some of the mutants that were introduced had such small parts and really weren't necessary for the story overall. When Mystique went to Vietnam to rescue the soldiers that were going to be transported to Bolivar Trask to be experimented on, we saw Toad, which I'm trying to figure that one out because Toad in the original X-Men looked a little too young to be in the Vietnam War, but maybe it was his father. I don't know. Then, of course, we saw Havoc, and I can't wait until they, at some point, explain that gap between him and, of course, his brother, Cyclops. We saw other characters. I don't know all the mutants in that particular scene, but one was called Ink. And, of course, then we also got the mutants that appeared in the future: Bishop, Blink, Warpath, Sunspot, and I mean they play their parts well. And don't get me wrong, I didn't hate everything about them. Blink, Sunspot, and Warpath actually got a pretty decent good amount of airtime, but I was a little disappointed in Bishop's role in this movie because in comic book wise, when it came to time traveling, Bishop always had a big part between him and Cable, which I think we will see Cable in the next movie. But I was kind of disappointed. Bishop could have played a good role. He could have helped out with Wolverine trying to convince Xavier and Magneto to follow the path to stop Mystique. But, you know, nothing can be done about that now. Okay, and then the next thing, and it's been my gripe through a lot of movies, and that's always about major characters in the X-Men universe getting killed off. Luckily, the list was a lot minor compared to previous movies, but some of the X-Men First Class didn't make it. We apparently, from what you hear about when Mystique breaks into the building and finds out the list of mutants that Bolivar Trask has been experimenting on, which means killing them to experiment on them, was Emma Frost and Banshee. Azrael, I think is his name, the guy that looked like a red demon. I mean, that guy I didn't really care about because I don't know too much about him. He's not a really big character in the universe. But Banshee and Emma Frost really played important parts in future stories. So it's like, I don't know. That was not the best idea to go killing off those characters. Now, true, I don't think we saw any actual bodies or anything like we did with, what's-her-face, Angel, the one who's Pixie, really, and Azrael. We did see their bodies, but we didn't see Banshee and Emma Frost, so I'm hoping that maybe that little loophole will give them a chance to appear in future movies, because those two characters are big in the X-Men universe. But another thing about this, and I guess it shouldn't really be a gripe, but it also, the fact is, it dwelled so much on Magneto versus Xavier. And I know a lot of a lot of movies have been about this, really. The first three trilogies was always Xavier versus Magneto, and it really never took off from there and really brought in more villains from the X-Men universe. I mean, they have a whole list of them, but it always ended up being Xavier versus Magneto in the movies. And don't get me wrong, I've enjoyed their character development up to this point, but I really hope, especially with X-Men Apocalypse coming out, that we can get away from it being those two always against each other and start bringing in some other people. I mean, start maybe bringing in the main Sentinel Master Mold, Mojo, which I know might be hard to explain in this universe because he'd being an alien from another dimension. You've got Arcade, who doesn't like mutants and sends them through all kinds of carnival type death traps to have fun with the mutants. We got Mr. Sinister. we got, I mean, there's a lot of characters. Sorry if I can't really give you a good listing of them right now. I just can't think of them. But I really hope future movies gets away from Magneto versus Xavier. I've enjoyed it up to now, but if you keep on doing it, enough is enough. Now I'd like to discuss a little more about what I thought of the cast and the cast of the X-Men, because there was an extensive cast. There is a huge amount of people in this movie. Let me get this list down here so I can, because some of the names I have trouble. I mean, I know the character name, but the actor's name can be a little much for me. So forgive me if I'm looking down at his screen right here. But we got to start off, of course, with Hugh Jackman playing Wolverine, which, it's Hugh Jackman and it's Wolverine. Those two have been perfect since day one of these movies. He continues to be the Wolverine we love. And the interesting part is they put the twist into it where he has to also now be sort of a mentor to Xavier and Magneto to a certain extent. And it's a different role for him. He's not one to be a mentor, but he has taken it in recent years with, of course, Wolverine and the X-Men and animation-wise. And he's taken that role sort of in the comic books too, but in the movie universe, we still know him as a badass, I don't give a damn about you, I'll run through a whole army just to get to you kind of guy. Don't take crap from no one. Basically, you're Dirty Harry of the new millennia. But Hugh Jackman continues, and I hope he continues his role until he can't do it anymore. He's done so great. And the thing is, what I've heard in rumors is that Hugh Jackman was originally going to retire from the role of Wolverine after this movie, but now it seems like this movie's lit a fire under him, and he's continuing on. It's going to be like another Robert Downey Jr. going to continue doing Iron Man. I don't know how long it'll be, but I don't know, at a certain point they will have to get someone else to play Wolverine because he's getting old. We gotta live with the fact that actors will change after a while, and it's coming. We know, but he will. As far as I know, I've heard that he's actually going to be in X-Men Apocalypse. So we'll see how that goes. Next, of course, is a double role, two people actually. James McAvoy and Patrick Stewart, of course, is Charles Xavier. And I think this was another thing that was extremely well done. I mean, you actually saw the evolution from James McAvoy's version to all the way to Patrick Stewart's. And you could see where everything came from. It's like it was the ultimate connection between the past and the future. It was so well done. And I think really, in the first movie, James McAvoy took a separate, like an alternate path on what he thought Xavier should be. This was the point before he was in the wheelchair, so he was a little cocky and a little sure of himself. And in this one, it's like a humongous U-turn happened after he was shot in the end of the first one. Well, thanks to Magneto, of course, but and as a result, he lost everyone. He lost all the students he had. He lost Moira McTaggart. And, of course, he lost his friend, Magneto. So, it was definitely a complete turn of events. But then, as Wolverine comes into it, and we start to see McAvoy's Charles Xavier really evolve into the passionate character that Patrick Stewart plays. Now, next, of course, we got Michael Fassbender and Ian McKellen, and we have the same thing there that we had for Charles Xavier. We saw the evolution of Magneto, where we know in the first one, he just made his turn to be bad, to be against humankind. But this one, we thought he might have really repented his ways, and then at the end of the movie, whap, you get another U-turn, and he's back to the Magneto we know. And we can see how, from this evolution of this character to what Ian McKellen plays in the future. And you can understand why he was the way he was. The question is are they going to sooner or later turn Magneto all good? Because that seems to be the direction they're heading with him. Especially during that end sequence in the future where he played a huge part and stopping the Sentinels long enough for Wolverine to do his thing in the past. So I think we're going to see a more evolution of this character in future movies. Of course, we see another major character that seems to be big in these new movies is, of course, Jennifer Lawrence playing Mystique. And she really played well for this character. I mean, the first movie, she was kind of annoying. She didn't really have no big part to play. But that changed drastically. Somewhere between First Class and Days of Future Past, wow, talking about a humongous change. And you saw, once again, another evolution from the Mystique from the First Class movie all the way to the first trilogy where she's just cold and calculating and don't give a damn. Of course, I don't know how they explain how Magneto and Mystique got back together after what happened in the Days of Future Past, but maybe we'll get those answers as we continue on with these movies. But she definitely played it well. I mean, you definitely saw signs of the Mystique from the first three movies in this one. So, and yet you still saw remnants of her past from the first movie. So it's really going to be interesting to see if they continue putting her forefront in the movies like they have. And I think they will concerning Apocalypse, because Mystique and Apocalypse did have a relationship. I don't mean like a romantic relationship, but a relationship nonetheless. Next on the list, which was very interestingly cast, as Peter Dinklage as Bolivar Trask. And I thought it unusual because I didn't know who it was at first, and because when you see him, they don't really show you his stature. But when you realize it's the guy from Game of Thrones that's like yay big, you're like, what the hell? But you know what? For someone as small as he is, he played a very good part. I think he did the role beautifully. I give him credit. I mean, it must be hard being his stature in this business to really get good roles, because they think of you mainly for like hobbits and Wizard of Oz people and stuff like that. They don't usually consider someone of his stature for such a serious role, and it was actually pretty nice to see him play this role, and he played it well. Of course, I still don't understand what his thing was with mutants, why he designed the Sentinels, because he did say in the movie that he respected the mutants and their abilities, but yet he wanted to wipe them off the face of the planet. So it's like, what the hell happened? Why? I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever get any explanation of that, though, because with the movie's end, we pretty much stopped the Sentinel program, at least for now. Next up on the list, of course, was Nicholas Hoult as Beast. Now, once again, I think he continued to do a good job. We got a chance to see him in and out of makeup because of his drug that he designed as Hank McCoy to be able to suppress the X gene, which is the mutant gene, which allowed him to look human again, and which also gave Xavier the ability to walk. Because apparently this drug, for some reason, gave him the ability to walk, but took away his telepathic abilities, which I'm not quite understanding that yet. But I think that's why I think they designed that little plot twist so Nicholas Hoult could actually act without all the makeup and stuff. Because it can be a little difficult to act with mask on, pretty much. I mean, he wasn't wearing exactly a mask, but all that fur and that paint and whatnot, it probably can be difficult to really portray your emotions genuinely without overdoing it, because that's a problem that Green Goblin had in the first Spider-Man. Because of the humongous mask, he had to overemphasize his actions to really get his emotion across, and I think maybe that's why they did that with Beast. I do hope in future movies, though, they keep him as the blue boy, the blue furry Beast. But, you know, that's, once again, only time will tell. Next on my list, of course, is the original X-Men trilogy cast, which, of course, Halle Berry as Storm, Ellen Page as Kitty Pryde, Shawn Ashmore as Iceman, and Daniel Cudmore as Colossus. And, oh my God, of course, we all want to see the original cast. They're the ones who started it. They're the ones we visualize when we think of the movie versions of these X-Men. And, you know, there's not much else to say about it. They didn't really have much airtime, but they played, you know, their parts well, their parts and how they should play them. it was just beautiful to see him again on screen, because after X-Men First Class, you never thought you were going to see these people again. You thought they were just going to end up having new people when they actually get to that point in the story. And that, of course, leads me to the next cast members, which are the they were really small, minor parts, and they were both from the New Mutants and Old Mutants. Of course, we had Omar Sy as Bishop. And once again, it was a big disappointment there that we didn't really get a chance to see him play a bigger role. But his mutant powers were well represented. He did have his amazingly humongous gun in it. We had Fan Bingbing as Blink. She played excellent for what little time she had on there. Her action roles were excellent. Excellently done. Then we had, I gotta see if I'm pronouncing this right, Adon Kanto played Sunspot, which he had some great action sequences, even though most of it was CGI, so he wasn't used as much as I'd love to see him. And then we had Boo Boo Stewart as Warpath, and I think his role was rather well played, even though he got killed brutally a couple of times. And again, every one of these smaller cast members really got a brutal death several different times. And of course, we had returning as Havoc Lucas Till, which, I was really disappointed by that. His appearance was only a cameo. I think he should have played a bigger role in the main part of the past storyline, but who knows? We might see that in future movies. And of course, instead of the original actor who played Toad, we had Evan Jonigkeit. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing these wrong. I'm really confused still about that one, because he looked nothing like the one we saw from the first movie. And the first movie's Toad looked too young to be in the Vietnam War, so I'm hoping that gets explained somehow. Even though he wasn't actually Cold Toad in this point. The next, of course, are the cameo mutants. This was the fun part. Like I said, this is the original cast. I only played very small roles at the ending, which of course was once again, forgive me if I pronounce these wrong, Famke Janssen, James Marsden, Kelsey Grammer, and Anna Paquin, of course, playing Jean Grey, Cyclops, Beast, and Rogue. It was great to see them. I can't really say much about their performance because they were cameos, but it was great to see them on screen again. Just like it was great to see the other members of the X-Men play their bigger parts than they did, but it was just wonderful to see it. And kind of makes you wonder, will we see the original cast in the X-Men films again? Because it seems like now they're just going to go from where we're at, which is in the 70s. I think what I've heard is the next movie's in the 80s, so I don't know how this is all going to play out, and if the old cast will return, except for Wolverine, of course, who's timeless. The next one, of course, was actually a highlight of the film, which was Evan Peters as Quicksilver. Oh my God, that sequence where he took out the guards before they could kill Magneto and Xavier was absolutely hilarious and classic. It was beautifully done, and it gives you hope for those of you who've seen the upcoming Flash TV series. It gives you some hope that it can actually do a power like that justice. It was absolutely funny, well worth the movie. You got to see that part. That is absolutely fantastic. I just wish they would have gave him a bigger role in this movie. But I have heard some news that he will play a bigger part in X-Men Apocalypse, so let's keep our eyes out for that. But that's it for the cast, really. And as in conclusion, though, after seeing this movie, it has left some questions in my mind that have not been answered, in my opinion. And first and foremost was, why did Mystique rescue Wolverine in the end? Wolverine was tossed by Magneto into the river with all kinds of metal sticking in and out of him, so it pretty much weighed him down to the bottom of this river. And at the end, Mystique actually saved him. And I'm not sure why she did. And what's worse is she disguised herself as, the guy who puts the adamantium in him. So it makes me wonder, is she responsible for getting him into the program that allowed him to get the adamantium on his bones. I mean, it's a question because she had no real relationship with Wolverine at this point. The only people she knew were Xavier and Magneto, and he was just a stranger along for the ride in her point of view. So it kind of makes you wonder what role will that play, and I'm hoping that question will be answered in future movies. Next question, very important question: did this erase everything from the first trilogy? Well, by the ending scene where Wolverine wakes up in the future, to a certain extent, no. I mean, obviously we'll see Rogue joining, and of course Wolverine joining, and all the X-Men, at that point with the school and everything. But obviously key events have been erased, like Jean Grey's death and Scott's death and whatnot. So, what exactly has been erased from the trilogy based off of what's happened? It's yet to play out, but I'm sure we are going to find out those questions, that answer that question soon enough. Now, next, of course, is how did Xavier survive after the last stand? Now, that was sort of answered in the post-credits of X-Men 3 Last Stand, where apparently he transferred his mind into a different body. Now, the only thing that needs explaining is how did that body happen to look like Patrick Stewart's version of Xavier? That's the part that's really the question. I mean, does his transfer of his mind instantly morph the body into what he looked like? Or did this person really look very similar to him? They said they were going to answer that question in this movie. They did not, unfortunately. We didn't even get, hey, I survived death myself. I went from one body to the other. It could have been handled a little better, I guess. Of course, next is what role will Quicksilver play in future movies now that we've heard that he's going to play a bigger role in X-Men Apocalypse? Are we going to finally see that relationship between him and Magneto and how it develops? Because at some point he does join his father on his crusade against humankind, but then again he breaks away and goes off and joins the Avengers, which is interesting because we have two, obviously we have two Quicksilvers out there. One in the new Avengers movie coming out, Avengers 2, and this one, which unfortunately, because of copyright issues, they can't mention any ties to each other or to Magneto in the Avengers 2 or him being a mutant. But what role will he play? That's a really good question. And then, of course, with the upcoming movie X-Men Apocalypse, how is this going to all form into one solid trilogy? How is this story going to play out and all hook up together to equal a trilogy? And that's something we're going to have to wait until we see the third movie, and I hope they do it well. And I hope it doesn't end things again like the previous trilogy. But speaking of that, though, now, I have to mention, and this is definitely big spoiler alert. This is the post-credit scenes that happen at the end, where we see En-Saba-Nur, which, as we know, is Apocalypse in ancient Egypt, building the pyramids by apparently manipulating rocks with his hands, and you hear in the crowd chant his name, and you see in the background his 4 horsemen. So, building up, of course, to the next movie, X-Men Apocalypse. And it kind of makes you wonder, how can there be a mutant back in Egyptian times? Because the whole basis of mutants is that the radiation and all this other mess that's going on in the world in recent times is pretty much mutated the human gene into what is known as mutants. So how do you explain Apocalypse? And then also, how do you cover the fact that he uses alien technology to become immortal, and his armor is also alien origin, has an origin of an aliens, as well as the ship that he uses as a base. So it's going to be interesting to see how they're going to finally take that turn and introduce outer space, aliens and all that stuff into an X-Men universe, which has been mostly Earth-based as of this point. But we'll just have to wait. Really, a lot of this, we're going to have to wait until the third movie. Now, as for my overall thoughts on X-Men Days of Future Past, once again, I repeat, I love this movie. This is definitely the X-Men movie you've got to see. If you're an X-Men fan, you have definitely got to see it. And if you don't see it once, you got to see it 5 times. That's right, I said 5 times. 5 times. 5 times. 5 freaking times. Because it is an excellent movie. It is well done, it is well written. Great mixture of character development and action, which I love to see. Definitely leaves you that lingering question on how they're going to connect this movie to X-Men Apocalypse. And I'm just ready. I'm ready for that movie. But my rating on this movie, well, it by far definitely gets 5 freaking stars. Last movie I reviewed, I gave 4 stars because of small gripes. This one, even though I did have small gripes with it, yes, I did have small gripes with this one, I still give it 5 stars. It is an outstanding movie. And you got to see it, whether you're an X-Men fan or not. No doubt about it. Now, the question is, where do we go from here? Where is the X-Men franchise going, and will it go on past X-Men Apocalypse? I'm ready to take the journey. How about y'all? I mean, it's definitely been quite a ride up to this point, and there have been so many X-Men movies, and so much to come still. With the news, we've also got Gambit coming back in X-Men Apocalypse, which I'm excited about. We'll have Quicksilver, Wolverine's going to be back, and of course we got Apocalypse finally hitting the big screen, and probably seeing more mutant introductions, especially the 4 Horsemen. We might even see Angel turn into Archangel, which would be an excellent addition as well, even though that will mess with the timeline of the story. But, you know, that's the movie business for you. They don't get everything right. But, anyways, like I said, go see this movie. I highly recommend it, and I highly recommend this as a DVD buy as well, because you got to see this movie over and over and over. You might even catch some things you first missed, because these kind of movies are always loaded with Easter eggs that you missed like the first 5 times. So make sure you buy it on DVD, but first make sure you see it in theaters, because that's the place where to see it most of all, because these kind of movies are meant to be seen on the big screen. Meant to be with a big bag of popcorn and a huge soda and friends and even a date. But anyways, that's my overall review of X-Men Days of Future Past. I hope you enjoy it when you see it, and I hope you continue watching me as well. So don't forget, if you happen to like this video, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Subscribe right here. I think it's right here. It might be right here. But subscribe to my channel and keep on watching Crimson's Corner. So guess what? This is Krimson once again signing off.